was when I was filling in, working at the hospital where I had done my chaplaincy, and I was paged to the medical ICU in the middle of the night, but then when I called they said, "Oh, we thought we needed you, but we don't." And when I inquired, they said, "We're going to discontinue life support on this patient, but her husband says he's okay." So I asked them to double check, and I started getting dressed, and the nurse came back on the line and said, "No, he's fine." And I said, I'm coming up anyway." And by the time I got there, they had discontinued life support, but the patient's heart was still beating, and I joined her husband at her bedside and asked if he'd been with her long, and he said yes, since the previous morning. It was about 4 in the morning, I guess, at this time. And I asked if he'd been talking to her, and he said, yeah, from about 5 o'clock last night, and I started by telling her everything I could remember about the first time I saw her. And he had been telling the story of their 50-odd-year marriage. And he started retelling it to me, small. And about 10 minutes into it, he looked at the nurse across the bed who said, "Yeah, she's gone." And he stopped his story for a moment and stroked his wife's cheek, and then grabbed my hand and said, "As I was telling you, chaplain." And he picked up his story and went on for about another 45 minutes through her illness, through her hospitalization, and then to her death. And I did nothing. I listened. I heard his story. I stood there with him. And at the end, and I asked if he wanted to, if he would like me to say a prayer or two, and he said that he would, and we prayed, and then he said, "Well, I guess it's time," and he kissed his wife goodbye and gathered up her belongings. And the policy at this hospital is that chaplains would walk the family of deceased patients to the door, and I walked him to his car in the parking deck, and he put a bag of his wife's stuff in the back seat and turned to me and threw his arms around me and said, "Chaplain, I never could have done this without you." And he kissed me, and he got in his car and he drove off. And then I burst into tears, and I stood in the parking lot crying for probably 15 or 20 minutes, realizing that what I had experienced was numinous, holy, rich and deep, and an experience that I wasn't going to forget.